Hey there, my name is Charles Patton and we are here to talk about academic language. Before we jump into discourse, vocabulary, and syntax, it's important to frame this entire conversation in the fact that language, from its earliest inception, has been used as a social learning tool that allows humans to collaborate. It's how civilizations formed and found resources and created power structure. It's how we've communicated to build vast networks of buildings, of roads. It's how people debate and we end up with documents like the Magna Carta or the Declaration of Independence. So as we go through this, it's important to realize that academic language is an incredibly authentic experience for our students. We are social creatures, and the concept of sharing these ideas back and forth in the right way is how we define and retain everything that we know. So we're going to begin with discourse. Discourse has to do with ideas moving back and forth between people. It literally comes from Latin, meaning running to and fro. There's obviously lots and lots of written discourse in the world, books, dissertations, papers, that share ideas. What's important about discourse and the concept of academic languages, these ideas go back and forth and we change them a little bit. We counter them. We ask if it's really accurate. Discourse is where we create space for students to share ideas. In the metaphor of driving, discourse is what we want in the end. We want to be able to put our student in a car, put them on the road, have them take in lots of stimulus and make effective decisions using consistent vocabulary and consistent rules for driving. We do that through vocabulary. Content vocabulary defines the specific concepts that we know and use every day in our content area. It's really the meat and potatoes. It's the building blocks of everything that we hold in our brain. If something doesn't have a word for it, oftentimes in society the concept is that it doesn't exist. It's also important in class to explicitly address what vocabulary means in the context of your content area. If you look at these examples right here, a ruler in math is going to be quite different than a ruler in history. A ruler in history is going to be sitting on a throne with a scepter and doing crazy things. Maybe not, but in general, negative connotation. In math, a ruler is just going to give you units of measure. You can also think of the same thing with a compass. A compass as a tool in math is going to be very different than a compass that we would use in an orienteering setting. Drafting to a NASCAR fan is going to mean something very different to drafting if you work in the construction industry. In vocabulary, driving, you have parts of a car, the gas pedal, the brake pedal, and it's important that we use the correct content vocabulary here, because if you grow up and your parent says, well, you push the fast pedal or the slow pedal, and then you get in and you have to take a test with a driving instructor who says gas pedal, all of a sudden you don't know, because you've been using this proxy word and you're having to spend RAM trying to translate instead of just having addressed the actual knowledge. These three pieces come together in the idea of syntax. Syntax are the rules that organize our content vocabulary as we share ideas through discourse. It literally comes from Greek, arranged together. In music, it's how you write consistently on a staff and how you arrange things that sound pleasing to the ear. In math, we have rules. Reading, if somebody said to you 2 times x plus y squared, without looking at it, it could be either one of these, but what we know when we see it is that the exponent outside of the parentheses is going to have a much different result than the exponent inside the parentheses. It's also important to address syntax because if you hadn't specifically addressed it in a chemistry setting and you said H2O, someone who wasn't familiar with syntax might think H by itself, 2O, which would actually look like that instead of like that. We know in chemistry that the number qualifies the letter before it, H2O something else. So it's important to address syntax correctly. Going back to our driving metaphor, syntax are the rules that we follow. If you are driving in London, The syntax is going to be very different than driving here because you're just going to be on the wrong side of the road. It also has to do with, when you merge, do people create space for you? Following the rules is what keeps us from having accidents. And we've seen how dangerous it is when people don't use a turn signal, or people run a stoplight or a stop sign because they're not following the syntax of driving. It really derails a lot of stuff. In Brunswick County, we talk a lot about the idea of, do we speak fluent math or do we speak fluent science? Can our students articulate what they're learning in whole sentences using the appropriate syntax and the appropriate vocabulary? Now, what's important about all three of these is that many of us do the vocabulary piece in our classroom. It's the most visible, it's sort of the tip of the iceberg, if you want to go with that metaphor. Syntax is also present a lot, and really this is more of an awareness piece. We see it a lot of times in student writing. We have to correct, make sure you spell this right, put a comma here. Is this the right form of there? It should be apostrophe Y, or apostrophe RE and not THEIR. So it shows up when we choose to look for it, and that's really a thing, is are you taking the time as a teacher to pay attention to the syntax that your students are using? The hardest level to see, the real deep down there, is discourse. Is it effective? Are students using vocabulary and syntax appropriately in discourse? And the most important, are we creating and explicitly modeling how discourse should happen in a classroom? It's easy to use vocabulary. We teach kids what it is. We learn how to pronounce it. We can even help teach syntax. But do we model that and expect it all the time? In the world of language acquisition, we deal with that in the concept of BICS and CALP, basic interpersonal communication skills and cognitive academic language proficiency. So a lot of times teachers will do an excellent job teaching their students vocabulary, but they use that vocabulary intermittently in very casual language, which does not help them create structures in their mind to understand that content. The other piece that's important about discourse is some really general neuroscience, and that says this. When we are receiving new information, when we're in this receptive mode, we are using dopamine, one, to stay focused, and two, to retain and contextualize this information. But as we go through this, dopamine tapers off and we stop producing it. So in order to create more dopamine, to create more opportunities to learn, it's important that we move students into an expressive mode. And this is an excellent opportunity for students to have discourse. Sharing those ideas, sharing that knowledge that they just received, is how you stimulate dopamine production and allow students to go back into a receptive mode to create more space for knowledge and learning, to contextualize new vocabulary, and to really challenge their ideas. That's really it in academic language. I know it's quick. If you have any questions, feel free to rewind the video. There will be lots of links down below. If you need to link out, I'm going to put some resources for other videos you can check out on YouTube, as well as some resources from some PowerPoints and stuff that are available through universities regarding academic language. Hope you have a wonderful time here at Summer Institute, and we'll see you around.